We're very lucky today because we have Jacob here. Well, how about we talk a little bit more about Beyond Perception? So this is an exhibition that opened earlier this year at Scienceworks.
Yep. So there were two of us, two senior designers. I was in charge of all the communications, and the other designer was in charge of all the, I guess we call it 3D, but it's the form or architectural build design and all the wall spaces and things like that. So he chose all the hard materials like the timbers and the metals and things like that. And I chose all the soft materials, which is usually the role of an interior designer, but we didn't have one on the project. So I was choosing carpets and materials for fabrics and things like that, and paint colors, palettes. So the exhibition basically is about the invisible forces in nature in physics. We chose wave patterns as kind of like the unifying thread throughout all. You find waves and sound and vision, and we created these 5 spaces. So what you're looking at is the title wall, which I was in charge of, and that sort of communicates the ideas that you're trying to get across graphically. I used a abstract of a waveform behind my lettering. I chose some like metallic letter forms just to put up there to show some light bouncing off it, because light is really huge as well. On the right hand side, you've got projections. So I created projection content as well, got to play with After Effects. I'm not sure if you know any of the programs, but it's like it's just a way of entering, and it makes you feel like you're walking on waves as you get into the space. That was really fun. It's not usually the graphic designer's role, but because of the skills that I have, I was able to implement that in a lot of the designs. So a lot of the content was created by us in-house.
Yeah, cool. So the image with the title is the very entrance of the other gallery spaces, and then you actually walk along this platform that you can see the projections down on to then get into the exhibition space. So what we've done here is a little bit like really setting the scene before they actually get to the exhibition space.
That's it. That was the term. They're scene setters. So yeah, before you even get in the space, you have these images and visuals and moving images.
To kind of get you ready for the immersive spaces that you're going to go into.
Yeah. So this is the first corridor you come across. We had these screens that were all set up. We created these images of the universe that parallaxed, and you could like walk along and see these different ways of seeing the universe through different lenses, like UV, ultraviolet, infrared. They have these cameras that I guess scientists use them to see different data in space. A lot of the notes that we did, usually you have a label in museums. We didn't want to do any labels. So a lot of the lettering that you see are actual notes that were written by scientists. So we just put those on the wall to make it look like a scientist has been in the room and just scribbled all over the wall as well. We did lots of research, and we found out that your age group don't read the labels that much, so it wasn't really, necessary. We did a lot of research around young adults from 13 to 18 years old. A lot of them don't go to these places by themselves, so we created these huge spaces for groups to hang out, because we know you guys like to hang out in groups.
With all your friends.
Yeah, with all your friends.
Yeah.
Again.
So it's quite a dark space. Could you maybe explain why, why is the exhibition such a, like there are spaces that are a little bit brighter, which we'll see in a moment, but it is quite dark. What's kind of the reasoning behind doing that?
A lot of the design was based upon feedback that we got from a group that we were working with. So they were like 13, 15-year-old students. We call them our junior board. Is that what we call them? Yeah. And they came along and we tested ideas, and they liked the idea of dark, creepy spaces. I don't know what it is about you guys, but yeah, I think it lent itself to being able to be fully immersed. In a lot of the digital work we have, it needed dark spaces as well. But one of the words we got was creepy in our feedback.
I guess when it's dark as well, you might feel a little bit more comfortable exploring, because there's
Yeah,
not everyone
definitely.
is looking at you to see what you're reading or what you're doing. So if it's darker, as an audience member, you can feel a bit more comfortable exploring and looking through different things, and gives you that sense of like, oh, I wonder what's in that corner, because I can't actually see it from this distance away. I need to move closer to explore what's over there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's something about dark spaces that creates a sense of drama. And I think we wanted that in the space as well.
Yeah, cool. Can you tell us about these vertical screens that are in different parts of the exhibition space?
Yeah. So we had this analogy that each room should be like a chapter in a book, and these were meant to be our chapter headers. So they name the room that you're going into. So there's 5 spaces, but there's one in each vertex of the walls. And before you enter in, you get this evocative image that tells you about what the space is, and then a quote as well as something poetic about the space that you're going in. There's never an idea that you're told exactly what you're going into. There's still some mystery about it as well. When I was art directing this, I wanted to look like movie titles. So yeah, when you
come in. It does look like a sci-fi movie title screen. Yeah, cool.
A lot of my influences for this space were from movies, sci-fi movies.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's talk about this space. This is one of my favorite spaces. What's the name of this one?
We call this Cacophony.
The Cacophony, awesome.
The Cacophony. So when we originally imagined it, it was supposed to hold all the ideas from all the different rooms. This is the main central room where people gather before they break out into the different spaces. Above you have these mirrored discs, and then down below you have these cushions that you could lie on. They all take about 2 to 3 people each, so you can lie down looking up at the mirrored disc. And we projected content on the floor, so all of that was moving. That runs for about an hour or something before it loops back again. But the idea was, again, the test group wanted somewhere to just hang out and take in a lot of the content. And this was a really creative way of doing it. The test group's ideas were based around whether it would look good on their snaps or in their Insta. So we designed a lot of the space to look good in those rooms. Here we had some vibrating chairs. So the idea with this is sound is transferred through your body, through the chairs, and you can visualize it as well. So you had visuals on the wall that related to the things you could feel through the chair. The chairs vibrate. Did I say that? Yeah.
Yes. So it's like Turbulence, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess because this is me as a designer, not as a scientist, trying to explain vibrations being the way that sound travels when particles pass through and hit your eardrums. So vibrations in the space were the key factor that we want to get across about sound and how it travels.
Yeah, cool. So it's kind of like in this situation, you've had to take scientific facts and scientific theories and implement them into a visual communication strategy.
Yeah, we have to communicate that idea.
Which is pretty
through
hard.
Design. It is.
To use visuals to communicate sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if you're no good at science.
So in this section, you sit behind, you can see the computer screens on either side. And what you're doing is you're actually projection mapping. So you're mapping the light projections that you see on the installation in the middle of the room. So tell us a bit more about this one.
Yeah, basically, again, the room is about data visualizations and how we visualize all the information that was given to us through all these waves. So we play with projection mapping as a way of data visualizing. You go in there, you map it against the form, and the idea is we'll be changing those shaders, which are all the patterns and things like that. It's just a cool experience. I think it's like, yeah, we've been getting some really good feedback about it. Again, the space is dark because we wanted something to feel like a cinema.
And so I guess in terms of communication design, in this section, you're asking the audience to kind of take over a little bit, aren't you?
Exactly.
To use, to manipulate their own visuals.
Yeah.
This one work.
This is Turbulence. So we've got a glass box with 6 fans on the floor, and we just threw a whole bunch of styrofoam balls into there, and they swirl around, creating all these eddies due to the air turbulence in there. There are 3 different turbulent experiences. The screens behind there, computer-generated turbulences, and this one was looking at the physical turbulence, so something real life. Another version of which uses small models, and we had mist just flowing around those models just to show what sort of patterns and eddies you can get.
This is the section for me that brings out the creepiness in the space, because you enter and it's quite a dark space, but off at this back wall you can see like this mist that's lit up by like the lights that are used underneath. And that does give this like eerie, creepy sense. So in terms of like communication design, if you're listening to your advisory group, which is the students that were working on the project with you, their brief was make it creepy, and you've done that by doing this.
Yeah, I think we did that.
So tell us about this projection and how people can interact with it.
So that's Lycra you're looking at with these projections coming from, they're projected from behind. The idea for this room were black holes in space and gravitational waves. Apparently when 2 black holes collide, they create waves in space, and they disrupt and stretch and pull everything in its path. It's really minute, but we've managed to measure it down here on Earth. And we wanted to show how black holes behaved when they came closer to each other. So you actually push and pull on the Lycra, and it stretches. Part of the design for this was a lot of prototyping. So when you're designing, you have to like create little models of the thing itself before you actually make the thing. We made life-size models of this, and the first test group that we had were trying to jump into it. And then we had people trying to manipulate the black holes with their butts. So we had to find ways to reinforce the Lycra, and we had to find materials that were going to be durable, especially with an age group that like to kick things.
So I guess that's a really big part of the design process, isn't it? Testing things, and then going back to your audience and doing audience testing and making sure, is this something that you want, getting their feedback, and then kind of changing things based on what that feedback is.
Definitely. And the materials, we get to play with some really cool materials. So that's another part of design that's really exciting. And random thoughts are constantly put on the wall. These walls are gonna be growing as well, in terms of people will be adding to them. So I bought a whole lot of Poscas in black, and the idea is scientists will come and go over the coming years, or just teachers with ideas, and write directly on the wall. So check back on that in a few years and see what it looks like.
So it's a constantly changing space, because obviously we know we're learning more and more about our life and our world every day. So, the things that in here might be what we think is right today, but maybe in 20 years' time, it's going to be something completely different. It'll have a different theory explaining how it works. So we need a space that's changeable and movable and flexible.
Exactly. And ideas will change and things like that. We may be wrong at the moment on some of these points, because we just put up what people think today. But we all know that in 10 years, like, that might be completely changed by one fact.
It might be one of these students watching us that might actually debunk one of these facts that we have on our walls.
So we have a Microscope Room, which is basically looking at microscopes from, and what was the other, satellites. So there are satellite images and microscopic images, and the idea was you go from the very minute to the very large in this space. We had mirrored walls on the left of this image, so that reflects everything around you. So it created a sort of maze, and it was to make you feel like you were inside the microscope itself, and those moving images would be floating around you.
it's a pretty beautiful space as well, because it's not just those images. Those images have been manipulated into a way to create like a kaleidoscope pattern sometimes. And so when you're in that space as a visitor walking around, it's really immersive, but it's also a little bit disorientating sometimes as they're moving slowly, and really giving you that sense of like you're really small or you're really big in comparison to what is on the screen. So it's all about, you know, how is the audience member or the visitor going to experience that space. And did you do audience testing with the teenagers for this space?
Yeah, we did. Again, the idea of getting lost in a microscope came out. That's how we communicated that idea, just with these large screens and mirrors. You've got the scientists talking over this as well, so there's audio to go along with this. It was really slow pace. Nothing in this exhibition is fast moving, and we don't guide you around the place. You're supposed to walk around and just take it all in. Usually in exhibitions, we lead people from A to B and finally out the door, but this was more a meandering idea. I think that we wanted that. Our audiences did not want to be told to move on, so we gave them spaces to hang out, just to like take things in, places to lie down, sit around, chat, talk to your friends, do whatever you feel like in the space.
Jacob, obviously the things that we see in the exhibition are the ones that, you know, after you audience tested, they said it was really good, they really liked it, or, you know, it was part of the brief. What things were you planning on doing maybe, and then you did audience testing or something else and you were like, they actually don't like that, we're not going to do that?
Yeah, perfect example was virtual reality. We thought, like, this is 2 years ago when we started testing for this stuff. Virtual reality, we put it in front of them, they hated it. It's just like, I do understand it's a really individual experience, and again, the group didn't want to do things on their own. There was this idea that if you did something, the whole group is doing it. And also it made people really nauseous. I don't think the content's caught up yet with the hardware, so it may do in a few years.
Best of luck on your communication design journeys. Could you all join me just now to say a big thank you to Jacob for joining us today.